Sergeant Elijah Ward has one of the most sacred jobs in America, guarding the tomb in total silence. But when a group of wealthy, entitled teens break in at night, laughing, spraying graffiti, and even spitting on the stone, Elijah is forced to act. The confrontation explodes, and when one shove is caught on camera, the story is twisted. Suddenly, the soldier sworn to protect honor is branded a criminal, while the spoiled bullies play the victims. As Elijah's name is dragged through the mud, powerful families move to bury the truth. But a hidden video, dangerous allies, and a fight for justice set the stage for a reckoning no one saw coming. Will Elijah clear his name and protect the tomb's honor, or will corruption silence him forever? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The marble gleamed under the moonlight as Sergeant Elijah Ward began his night shift at the tomb of the unknown soldier. His polished shoes clicked against the stone in perfect rhythm. 21 steps, a precise turn, 21 steps back. The ritual was as familiar to him as breathing, but its significance never diminished. The spring night air carried a slight chill. Arlington National Cemetery stretched before him, an endless sea of white headstones catching the silvery moonlight. Each marker represented a story, a sacrifice, a life given in service. Elijah thought of James, his battle buddy from basic training, who now rested somewhere among those endless rows. The memory tightened his throat, but his face remained stoic, his movements unwavering. Click, click, click. His heels struck the pavement with military precision. The tomb itself seemed to pulse with quiet energy, a sacred presence demanding absolute reverence. The inscription carved into the marble spoke volumes in its simplicity. Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. 21 steps. Turn. Face east for precisely 21 seconds. His movements were a testament to thousands of hours of training and dedication. Every motion had to be perfect. The public expected nothing less. But Elijah knew they expected even more from him specifically. As one of the few black tomb guards in history, he carried an additional weight on his shoulders. The night wind rustled through nearby trees as Elijah continued his meticulous patrol. His ceremonial uniform felt especially heavy tonight, each medal and badge a reminder of the scrutiny he faced. He'd overheard the whispers, seen the lingering stares, felt the unspoken question in visitors' eyes. Did he belong here? But the unknown soldier didn't care about the color of his skin. Death in battle made no such distinctions. Elijah straightened his shoulders, letting his practiced movements speak for themselves. Every step, every turn, every gesture was a statement of belonging, of earned honor. The cemetery's silence wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. This was his 8th year as a tomb guard, and the quiet hours had become a time of reflection. He thought about his grandfather, who'd served in Vietnam but came home to drink himself to death, haunted by memories he couldn't shake. He thought about his mother, who'd pressed his first uniform with tears of pride in her eyes. Click, click, click. 21 steps north. The number wasn't random. It referenced the 21-gun salute, the highest military honor. The night deepened around him as he continued his precise routine. Most people couldn't understand the dedication it took to maintain this level of discipline hour after hour. The uniform alone weighed 20 pounds, but Elijah had learned to move as if it were weightless. His muscles burned with the effort of maintaining perfect form, but he welcomed the sensation. Physical discomfort was nothing compared to the honor of his duty. The cemetery stretched out behind him, a silent city of heroes. Sometimes, in the quietest hours before dawn, Elijah imagined he could feel their presence. All those who'd given everything for their country, watching over his shoulder as he guarded their unknown brother. A sound carried on the wind, faint at first, barely noticeable. Laughter. Footsteps. They echoed from the direction of the cemetery gates, breaking the sacred silence of the night. Elijah maintained his measured pace, but his senses heightened, attuned to the intrusion. Click, click, click. His steps continued, unwavering, as the distant sounds grew closer. Elijah's ears caught the growing sound of drunken laughter and stumbling footsteps. His eyes narrowed slightly, the only break in his perfect composure. Through years of experience, he'd learned to spot trouble before it arrived. These footsteps didn't carry the respectful hesitation of legitimate visitors. 3 figures emerged from the shadows between the headstones. Even in the moonlight, their expensive clothes and careless swagger marked them as privileged youth with no concept of consequence. Beer cans glinted in their hands as they walked, or rather stumbled, toward the memorial plaza. "Check it out," the tallest one called out, his voice carrying too loud across the sacred ground. "It's like a real-life toy soldier." Carter Hayes raised his beer in a mock salute, his designer jacket probably worth more than Elijah's monthly salary. Elijah maintained his precise rhythm. Click, click, click. 21 steps north. The boy's presence felt like a stain spreading across his pristine watch, but his face remained impassive. He'd weathered worse than drunk teenagers. "Hey, Mason, bet you can't do that walk?" Dylan Brooks snickered, holding up his phone to record. His thin face glowed blue in the screen's light. "You know, all robot-like." Mason Clark, broad-shouldered and moving with the clumsy confidence of the drunk, attempted an exaggerated march. His heavy steps echoed wrongly against the stone. "Look at me, I'm a fancy guard." He stumbled, catching himself with a laugh that seemed to pierce the night's solemnity. An empty beer can clattered across the plaza. The sound made Elijah's jaw clench, but his steps never faltered. Turn. Face east. The young men's reflection appeared in the polished marble beside his own. Their loose, entitled postures, a stark contrast to his rigid discipline. "Do you think he's even real?" Carter walked closer, peering at Elijah like he was an exhibit in a museum. "Hey, man, you can drop the act. Nobody's here but us." His words carried the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no in his life. 21 steps south. Elijah's fingers tightened imperceptibly on his rifle. He'd seen their type before. Children of wealth and influence who viewed the world as their personal playground. But this was no playground. This was hallowed ground. Dylan circled with his phone, filming from different angles. "This is going on my story," he announced. Caption: "Most boring job ever." He stepped deliberately into Elijah's path, forcing him to adjust his route slightly. The small deviation felt like a personal failure to Elijah, though he knew it was necessary to maintain the watch. Every step carried the weight of tradition, of honor. These boys couldn't understand that. They couldn't comprehend what it meant to stand guard over fallen heroes. "Watch this," Mason called out. He crushed his empty can and tossed it, the aluminum spinning through the air before clattering across the plaza. 10 points! The sound echoed wrongly in the sacred space. Elijah continued his measured pace, though his heart pounded with growing tension. Click, click, click. Each step was a reminder of his duty, his oath. The tomb guard's creed ran through his mind like a mantra. "My standard will remain perfection." "He's not even blinking," Carter observed, moving closer to the tomb itself. His presence near the sacred stone made Elijah's muscles coil with protective instinct. "Come on, man. You can't tell me you do this all night. What's the point?" 21 steps north. Elijah's face remained stoic, but inside, a storm was building. These boys were desecrating more than stone and marble. They were mocking sacrifice itself, treating holy ground like their private party spot. "Bet I can make him move," Dylan said, his voice carrying that particular cruel edge of the young and privileged. He raised his nearly empty bottle, weighing it in his hand. The threat was clear in his stance. The night air seemed to grow thicker, heavier with tension. Elijah maintained his watch, but his senses tracked every movement of the bottle in Dylan's hand. Years of military training warred with his ceremonial duty. The tomb guard was never supposed to break formation, but they were also charged with protecting the sanctity of the tomb at all costs. Dylan's arm drew back, the bottle catching moonlight. "Hey, soldier boy," he called out, his voice slurring slightly. "Catch." The glass arced through the air, spinning end over end toward the white marble of the tomb. Time seemed to slow as Elijah faced his impossible choice: maintain the sacred ritual that defined his duty, or break formation to protect the very thing he was sworn to guard. 21 steps became an eternity as the bottle tumbled through space, forcing Elijah to decide which oath carried more weight: perfection of movement or protection of the sacred. The bottle crashed against the tomb's base, glass shattering across the sacred marble. Elijah's heart thundered, but his steps remained measured. Each footfall felt like betrayal now, staying silent while these entitled boys desecrated everything he'd sworn to protect. "Boring," Carter announced, his voice thick with alcohol and contempt. He reached into his expensive jacket, pulling out something that made Elijah's blood run cold: a can of spray paint. "Let's give this place some color." The first hiss of aerosol cut through the night like a knife. Neon paint splashed across the pristine white marble, forming crude letters. Carter's unsteady hand turned the sacred monument into his personal canvas. "My turn!" Mason grabbed for the can, nearly dropping it in his drunken state. More paint sprayed wildly, defacing the solemn inscription that had stood watch over fallen heroes for generations. Something inside Elijah finally snapped. The sacred rhythm of 21 steps dissolved as he stepped out of formation, his boots striking the stone with purpose. "Stop immediately," he commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of military authority. "You are defacing a national monument. Leave now." Carter turned, surprise flickering across his face before morphing into a smirk. "Oh, look, the robot speaks." He tossed the spray can to Dylan, who caught it one-handed while still filming. "What's wrong, toy soldier? Don't like our art?" "This is hallowed ground," Elijah stated, each word precise and controlled, despite the rage building in his chest. "You will leave. Now." His grip tightened on his rifle, though he kept it in ceremonial position. "Hallowed ground?" Mason mimicked, swaying slightly. "It's just a big rock, man. Lighten up." He stumbled closer to Elijah, alcohol fumes heavy on his breath. "What are you going to do about it anyway?" Dylan circled them, his phone's camera light casting harsh shadows. "Yeah. What happened to your little dance routine? 21 steps this way, 21 steps that way." His mocking march drew laughs from his friends. "Final warning." Elijah's voice remained steady, though his pulse pounded in his ears. "Exit the Memorial Plaza immediately, or I will be forced to call security." His dark eyes met each of theirs in turn, searching for any sign of conscience or respect. "Or what?" Carter stepped forward, invading Elijah's space. "You'll march us to death?" His confident sneer spoke of countless confrontations where money and influence had shielded him from consequences. "Go back to your robot routine." "Better listen to him," Mason added with a cruel laugh. "Daddy's probably got the whole cemetery board on speed dial." He turned to his friends. "Can you imagine if this rent-a-cop tried to touch us? Career over in 5 minutes." The slur that followed hit Elijah like a physical blow. Carter said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. But the word carried centuries of hate. The other boys laughed, emboldened by their leader's cruelty. Elijah's jaw clenched so tight it hurt, but he held his composure. He'd faced this before, in training, in service, even here at the tomb. But never had it felt so personal, so entwined with his sacred duty to protect this place. "What's wrong?" Carter pressed, sensing the impact of his words. "Lost your robot programming?" He reached out and flicked Elijah's sleeve, testing limits. "Maybe we should reprogram you, teach you your place." Mason's glob of spit hit the marble with a wet sound that seemed to echo across the plaza. The desecration was deliberate, calculated, a direct challenge not just to Elijah, but to everything the tomb represented. Something deeper than training, deeper than discipline, finally broke. Elijah's hand shot out, catching Mason's chest and shoving him backward. The drunk teenager stumbled, arms windmilling, before landing hard on the plaza stone. "You touched me!" Mason's voice cracked with indignation and surprise. "Did you see that? He attacked me!" He scrambled to his feet, face red with rage and embarrassment. Carter's smirk widened as Dylan adjusted his camera angle. "Oh, we saw everything," he said, satisfaction dripping from every word. "Every single second." The reality of what he'd done hit Elijah like ice water. He'd broken his sacred watch, violated his training, let these spoiled children provoke him into exactly what they wanted. But as he looked at the defaced marble, the spittle slowly dripping down its face, he couldn't find regret. Only a deep, burning certainty that some violations demanded response, even at terrible cost. "Oh God, my ribs!" Mason wailed, his voice echoing across the silent plaza. "I think he broke something." His performance was almost comical. A drunk teenager trying to method act his way through imaginary pain. Dylan's camera never wavered, but his framing was deliberate. The lens captured only Elijah's push, missing the spray paint, the spitting, the slurs. Each second of footage was carefully curated to tell their twisted version of events. "You okay, buddy?" Carter knelt beside Mason, barely concealing his grin. His voice carried just the right note of concern. Practiced, performative. That was a really hard hit. "Maybe we should call an ambulance?" Mason groaned louder, rolling from side to side. "It hurts so bad." He peeked through his fingers at Dylan, making sure the camera caught his performance. "I can't believe a guard would do this." "Keep going," Carter whispered, patting Mason's shoulder. "Make it look good." Then louder, for the camera. "Someone in authority attacking innocent teenagers? This is serious!" Elijah stood rigid, anger and frustration burning in his chest. Every military instinct screamed at him to maintain discipline, but he couldn't let them walk away. "Show me your identification, all of you. Now." Carter laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Or what? You'll assault us again?" He helped Mason to his feet, supporting him even though they all knew it was an act. "You're in no position to make demands." "Yeah," Dylan chimed in, still filming. "Pretty sure attacking minors isn't part of your job description." He adjusted his grip on the phone, making sure to catch Elijah's reaction. "Wonder what your superiors will think when they see this." Elijah's hand moved to his radio, fingers wrapping around the cold metal. "Final warning. Present identification, or I'm calling security." His voice remained steady, professional, even as rage churned beneath the surface. "Run!" Carter suddenly shouted, shoving Mason toward the plaza steps. "He's going to attack us again." The three boys scattered like startled birds, their laughter trailing behind them. Mason's limp mysteriously vanished as he sprinted away, his earlier performance forgotten in the rush of escape. Elijah grabbed his radio, pressing the transmit button with controlled force. "Guard post to main gate security. 3 suspects fleeing north from the plaza." Vandalism and desecration of the tomb. Detain for questioning. The radio crackled. Copy that. Units moving to intercept. He could hear distant shouts as security caught up with the boys near the cemetery gates. Elijah allowed himself a small measure of satisfaction. At least they wouldn't escape completely unscathed. He had done his duty, protected the tomb as best he could under impossible circumstances. Following protocol, he documented everything. The spray paint defacing the marble, the broken glass from their bottles, the wet mark where Mason had spit. Each detail carefully noted, each violation recorded with military precision. The truth would come out, he told himself. The full story would be told. But near the main gate, a very different story was taking shape. Dylan hunched over his phone, fingers flying across the screen as he trimmed the video. His face glowed with the blue light of the display, highlighting his satisfied smirk. The longer footage showing their vandalism disappeared with a few taps, leaving only the crucial seconds of Elijah's push. "This is perfect," he whispered to Carter, who peered over his shoulder while security took their information. "Watch how it looks with just this part." The edited clip played back. A stern-faced black guard suddenly attacking a white teenager without provocation. No context, no build-up, just violence that fit their narrative perfectly. "Send it," Carter urged, his voice low and eager. "Send it to everyone." Dylan's thumb hovered over the share button. "Getting him good," he murmured, selecting multiple group chats. Friends, family connections, local news tips, every channel they could use to spread their version of events. "No one messes with us." The blue light from his phone illuminated their faces as the video uploaded, casting harsh shadows that matched their cruel intentions. Mason stood nearby, giving his best victim statement to the security officers. All traces of his drunken swagger replaced by wounded innocence. The guards were professional, but clearly uncomfortable. 3 wealthy white teenagers claiming assault by a tomb guard was above their pay grade. They took down the basics: names, contact information, basic statements. But their hesitation was obvious, their uncertainty about how to handle the situation playing across their faces. Carter watched the security officer's discomfort with familiar satisfaction. He'd seen that look before. Adults realizing that crossing kids with powerful parents could end careers. His father's influence cast a long shadow. Even here, videos going viral, Dylan reported quietly, watching the first shares and reactions roll in. "My cousin at the news station already wants the footage." Mason rejoined them, dropping his victim act now that the security officers had moved away. "Did you see their faces?" he snickered. "They have no idea what's coming." "Neither does our toy soldier," Carter added, glancing back toward the plaza where Elijah continued his watch. "No idea at all." The first rays of dawn painted Arlington's marble monuments in soft pink light. Elijah completed his final ceremonial steps, his movements precise, despite his exhaustion. The night's events had left him drained, but his posture remained perfect as the relief guard approached for the changing of the guard ceremony. Back home, Elijah climbed the worn steps to the modest townhouse he shared with his mother. The familiar scent of coffee and bacon greeted him as he opened the door. Loretta Ward stood at the stove, her silver hair neatly tied back, humming softly as she cooked. "Morning, baby," she said without turning around. "You look tired. Rough night?" Elijah sank into a kitchen chair, his shoulders finally relaxing. "Had some trouble with vandals. Rich kids trying to mess with the tomb." He rubbed his eyes. "But security caught them. It's being handled." Loretta set a plate of eggs and bacon in front of him, studying his face with motherly concern. "You sure you're okay? I know that sacred duty means everything to you." "I'm fine, Mama." Elijah managed a small smile. "The Army takes desecration seriously. Those boys won't get away with it." His phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Elijah ignored it, focusing on his breakfast as Loretta sat across from him with her coffee. The buzzing continued, growing more insistent. "Maybe you should check that," Loretta suggested, frowning at the vibrating phone. "Might be important." Elijah picked up the phone. His stomach dropped. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of notifications, messages from his commanding officer, fellow guards, friends, and everywhere, a video thumbnail showing him shoving Mason. "Oh, Lord," Loretta whispered, watching over his shoulder as Elijah opened a news link. "What is this?" The headline screamed across his screen. "Violent assault at tomb of unknown soldier. Guard attacks unarmed teenagers." Below it, the carefully edited clip played on repeat, showing nothing of the vandalism, the racial slurs, the spitting. Just Elijah's moment of lost control. "This isn't right," he muttered, scrolling frantically through comments calling for his arrest, his discharge, worse. "Where's the rest of it? They were vandalizing the tomb." Loretta's hand gripped his shoulder. "Breathe, baby. We'll figure this out." His phone rang, his commanding officer. Elijah answered, standing straight despite being home. "Sergeant Ward speaking, sir." "Ward, what the hell is going on?" The colonel's voice crackled with barely contained fury. "I've got 3 sets of wealthy parents threatening lawsuits, news stations calling for comments, and a viral video of one of my guards assaulting civilians." "Sir, I can explain. They were vandalizing the—" "Save it for the investigation. Stay put at your residence. That's an order." The line went dead. Elijah stared at his phone, then at his mother's worried face. "Mama, I know, baby." She pulled him into a hug, like she had when he was small. "I know you did what was right." Outside, a news van pulled up. Then, another. Reporters gathered on their small lawn, cameras pointed at the house. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering and pointing. Loretta's jaw set in a determined line. "Don't you pay them any mind. Let me make you some more coffee." A heavy knock cut her off. Through the front window, they could see military police vehicles parked alongside the news vans. "No," Loretta whispered. "They wouldn't dare." Another knock, harder. "Sergeant Ward! Military police! Open up!" Elijah straightened his shoulders, squaring them like he did at the tomb. "It's okay, Mama. They'll sort this out." He opened the door. 2 MPs stood on the porch, stone-faced. Behind them, cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions. "Sergeant Elijah Ward?" The senior MP held up a warrant. "You're under arrest for assault and conduct unbecoming. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Loretta pushed forward. "This is ridiculous! My son serves with honor. He protects our fallen soldiers." "Ma'am, please step back." The MP moved between them as his partner cuffed Elijah. The handcuffs clicked shut. Cameras captured every moment. Neighbors watched from their porches as Elijah, still in his dress uniform from his shift, was led down the steps. "It's okay, Mama," he called back, keeping his head high. "Call Reverend Jackson. He'll know what to do." Loretta stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but her spine straight and proud. "Hold your head up, baby. God sees the truth." The MPs guided Elijah into the back of their vehicle. Through the window, he watched his mother grow smaller as they drove away, her dignified silhouette framed in the doorway of their home. The home he'd bought with his guard's salary. The home he'd promised would always be a place of pride. As the vehicle turned the corner, the last thing he saw was a reporter shoving a microphone in his mother's face, and the way she turned away, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. Even in crisis, Loretta Ward maintained her dignity, just as she'd taught him to do. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elijah stood before the booking desk, his fingers pressed against the ink pad. The cold metal handcuffs had left red marks on his wrists. His pristine dress uniform, the symbol of his sacred duty, had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit that felt like sandpaper against his skin. "Face forward," the booking officer commanded, holding up the camera. The flash burned Elijah's eyes, but he maintained his military bearing, refusing to slump or show weakness. "Hey, ain't that the guy from the video?" a voice whispered from the holding cell. "The one who beat up those rich white kids?" "Man, what was he thinking?" another voice responded. "You know they gonna bury him for that." Elijah kept his face blank as the officer led him down the corridor. Their footsteps echoed off concrete walls covered in cheap institutional paint. Other inmates pressed against their cells to stare at him, some with sympathy, others with sneers. The cell door clanged shut behind him. Elijah sat on the thin mattress, his hands clasped between his knees, trying to maintain the discipline that had defined his life. But in the quiet of the cell, the night's events played on repeat in his mind. The spray paint defacing sacred marble, the hatred in their eyes as they spat that slur. The satisfying feel of shoving Mason back, followed instantly by the knowledge that he'd broken his sacred oath of discipline. 21 steps. 21 seconds. A ritual he'd performed thousands of times, destroyed in one moment of human weakness. First time in the joint? A gravelly voice broke through his thoughts. Elijah looked up to see an older white man with steel-gray hair being led into the cell. Despite his age, he carried himself with military bearing that Elijah recognized instantly. Frank Delaney. The man introduced himself as the door locked behind him. "Got myself arrested protesting outside the VA office. They're cutting benefits again." He settled onto the opposite bunk with a grunt. "Saw you on the news before they brought me in." Elijah tensed, waiting for judgment or condemnation, but Frank just nodded thoughtfully. "Tomb guard, right? Sacred duty. I visited there after Nam, watching you boys march. Helped me find some peace." He studied Elijah's face. "Those punk kids had no business there." "You saw what really happened?" Elijah asked, his voice rough. "Saw enough. That edited clip's making the rounds, but veterans know better. We understand what that place means." Frank leaned forward. "Listen, son. I've been around long enough to know. The truth always surfaces. Might take time, might get ugly first, but it comes out. My whole life, sir," Elijah said quietly, "I've tried to honor the uniform, to prove I deserve to guard that sacred ground. Now look at me. You think you're the first soldier to get knocked down by the system?" Frank's voice carried the weight of experience. "I came back from Nam, to people spitting on my uniform. But we endured. The truth survived." A guard appeared at the cell door. "Ward, you've got a visitor." They led Elijah to a visiting room divided by thick glass. His heart clenched when he saw his mother on the other side. Loretta Ward sat straight-backed in her Sunday best, her face composed despite the redness around her eyes. "My baby," she said, as he sat down, pressing her hand against the glass. Elijah matched his palm to hers, wishing he could feel her warmth through the barrier. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. "I let you down." "Elijah James Ward, don't you dare apologize." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You protected something sacred, just like your daddy taught you before he passed. The media's destroying my name. The army's turning its back on me. Let them try." Loretta's chin lifted. "We are descendants of people who survived far worse than this. Your great-grandfather was a Buffalo soldier. Your daddy earned a Bronze Star. You guard our nation's fallen with honor. Hold your head high, baby. What if I can't clear my name? Truth is like cream, baby. It always rises to the top." She smiled, the same smile that had comforted him through childhood nightmares and teenage doubts. "Reverend Jackson is already rallying support. Veterans groups are asking questions. God didn't bring you this far to leave you. A guard called time. Loretta stood, smoothing her skirt. I raised you to stand tall in the face of injustice. Remember who you are, Sergeant Ward. Remember the sacred duty you carry. Elijah pressed his hand against the glass one last time. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Hold your head high. I'll be back tomorrow. As they led him back to his cell, Elijah felt something shift inside him. The shame didn't vanish, but it transformed into something harder, more determined. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Hold your head high. Frank looked up as Elijah returned to the cell. Good visit? Yes, sir, Elijah replied, standing at parade rest out of habit. My mama reminded me who I am. Smart woman, Frank nodded. Sometimes we need someone to remind us of our strength when the world tries to break us down. Morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows as Elijah signed his release papers. His hands trembled slightly, but his face remained composed. The orange jumpsuit was gone, replaced by civilian clothes his mother had brought, pressed khakis and a crisp white shirt, maintaining dignity even without his uniform. The bail's been posted, the clerk announced, sliding the paperwork across the counter. Veterans groups from across the country contributed. Elijah nodded silently, touched by the support of fellow service members he'd never met. His attorney, a court-appointed defender named Marcus Thompson, stood beside him with a grim expression. There's a media circus outside, Marcus warned, adjusting his tie. Keep walking. Don't engage. Any statement could be twisted against you. Through the courthouse's heavy wooden doors, they could hear the growing commotion. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Elijah emerged, his mother's hand steady on his arm. Microphones thrust toward his face like weapons. Sergeant Ward, did you assault those minors? Do you regret attacking innocent teenagers? Should you be stripped of your position? The questions felt like physical blows, but Elijah kept his eyes forward, walking with the measured pace of a soldier. Loretta's grip tightened protectively as reporters pressed closer. Those boys were just taking photos. Do you have anger management issues? Is this racially motivated? A small figure darted through the crowd, a young Latina woman in professional attire, her press badge reading Sofia Morales, Independent News. Unlike the others, she didn't shout accusations. Sergeant Ward, she called firmly but respectfully, I'd like to hear your side of the story. About the vandalism. Elijah paused slightly. It was the first mention of what had actually happened that night. Sophia pressed forward, her dark eyes intense with purpose. The security footage from Arlington seems to be missing, she continued, and the boys' families are blocking access to the full video. Don't you think the public deserves to know the truth? Marcus tried to hustle Elijah toward the waiting car, but Sophia quickly pressed her card into his hand. I believe there's more to this story. Call me if you want to talk. In the back seat of his mother's old Buick, Elijah studied the business card while cameras flashed outside the windows. Sofia Morales, investigative reporter. Her handwritten cell number was scrawled on the back. That young lady seemed different from the rest, Loretta observed, carefully navigating through the media vehicles. She wanted truth, not scandal. Elijah nodded, remembering the determined look in Sophia's eyes. She'd been the only one to mention the vandalism, the only one questioning the convenient gaps in evidence. The drive home was tense with unspoken worries. Their modest neighborhood looked unchanged, but neighbors peeked through curtains as they passed. Mrs. Johnson, who usually waved cheerfully, quickly shut her door. Inside their small house, Loretta went straight to the kitchen. Her way of dealing with stress was to cook. Soon the smell of cornbread filled the air, a comfort from Elijah's childhood. He sat at the worn kitchen table, Sophia's card still in his hand. Those boys' families, Loretta said as she worked. I looked them up while you were away. She paused, kneading dough with extra force. The Hayes boys' daddy owns half the construction contracts in Virginia. The Brooks family has judges and senators at their dinner table. And the Clarks? She shook her head. Old money, old power. You think I shouldn't fight back, Elijah said quietly. No, baby. Loretta turned to face him, flour dusting her arms. I think you need to know what you're up against. These people, they've got money to bury the truth and connections to ruin lives. They'll try to paint you as an angry black man who attacked their innocent white children. But you still think I should fight? I think you need to fight smart. She wiped her hands on her apron. That journalist girl, she might be onto something. The truth is there. In missing footage, in witnesses, they're trying to silence. But getting to it won't be easy. Elijah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street where he'd played as a child, dreaming of serving his country. His father's old Marine Corps flag still hung proudly by the door. They didn't just disrespect me, Mama, he said softly. They desecrated holy ground. They spat on the sacrifice of men and women who gave everything for this country. His voice strengthened with conviction. I won't let them bury that truth. It'll be hard, baby. Might get worse before it gets better. Then I'll endure. Elijah squared his shoulders, the posture of countless guards before him who'd stood watch through storms and darkness. I'll restore my honor, clear my name. Not just for me, but for the sacred duty I swore to uphold. The Bell and Anchor Cafe sat on a quiet corner, its faded awning and worn brick exterior a testament to decades serving veterans. Inside, the walls displayed service medals and unit patches, creating a museum of sacrifice and honor. Elijah pushed open the heavy wooden door, the brass bell above tinkling softly. The morning crowd was thin, a few older vets nursing coffee, scattered conversations about medications and grandkids. Frank Delaney waved from a corner booth, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Good to see you in regular clothes, Frank said as Elijah slid into the vinyl seat. Orange wasn't your color? A waitress brought coffee without asking, the universal fuel of morning meetings. Steam rose between them as Frank studied Elijah's face. You holding up okay, son? Managing, Elijah replied, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. Thank you for meeting me. Frank nodded toward two men at the counter. Hey, Mike, Pete, come meet someone. The men ambled over, one tall and lean with a Vietnam veteran cap, the other stocky with a Marine Corps ring. Both carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of long service. Boys, this is Sergeant Ward, Frank said. The tomb guard they're trying to railroad. Mike extended his hand first. We were there that night, walking the grounds, paying respects to old friends. Elijah's grip tightened on his mug. You saw what happened? We heard, Pete growled, pulling up a chair. We were visiting Pete's brother's grave. 20 years since we lost him in Desert Storm. Heard those punks way before we saw them. Drinking, laughing, acting like it was some kind of playground, Mike added. His voice carried the quiet anger of a man who'd seen too much disrespect. We were about to confront them ourselves. You'd testify? Elijah asked, hope rising in his chest. Tell what you really saw? Already tried, Pete said grimly. Police wouldn't take our statement. Said the case was being handled at a higher level. But we'll tell anyone who'll listen, Mike insisted. Those boys need to face consequences. The bell above the door chimed again. Sophia Morales entered, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her dark hair pulled back professionally. Frank waved her over. Perfect timing, he said. Pull up a chair, young lady. These gentlemen have stories you need to hear. Sophia opened her notebook as Mike and Pete recounted the night's events. Her pen moved rapidly, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. When they finished, she turned her laptop around. I've been digging into our vandals, she said. Carter Hayes. His father, Senator Hayes, sits on 3 military oversight committees. Recently pushed through controversial defense contracts worth billions. She clicked to another document. Dylan Brooks. Mother's a top-tier lobbyist for tech companies. She's known for making problematic stories disappear from social media. And Mason Clark? Daddy's construction empire built half the government buildings in D.C. They're all connected, all powerful. That explains the cover-up, Frank muttered. Money talks. It's worse, Sophia continued. I found sealed juvenile records. 3 years ago, Carter and his friends trashed a local church, spray-painted slurs, broke windows. The case mysteriously vanished. Last year, they hospitalized a student in a pranking incident. Charges dropped. Victim's family suddenly moved away. Pattern of behavior, Mike noted. Entitled little bastards. And they always get away with it, Pete added bitterly. Elijah studied the documents, recognizing the same smirking faces from that night. How did you get these records? I have sources, Sophia said. People tired of watching justice get buried. But we need more. The full video, security footage, anything that shows what really happened. The cemetery cameras must have caught everything, Frank mused. But good luck accessing those files now. I'm working on it, Sophia said. Someone always talks eventually. Power makes people careless. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening. What is it? Elijah asked. Sophia turned the phone so they could see. The message was simple but chilling. Drop the story. Or else. Anonymous number, she said, trying to sound casual. Probably routed through servers overseas. They're scared, Frank said, leaning forward. Means you're getting close to something. I'm not stopping, Sophia declared, but her hands trembled slightly as she put the phone away. The truth matters more than threats. Mike and Pete exchanged looks. We'll spread the word through our veterans groups, Mike said. Get more witnesses to come forward. Safety in numbers. And I'll keep digging, Sophia added. They can't silence everyone. Elijah sat back, watching these allies gather around him. The old soldiers with their unwavering honor, the young journalist with her fierce dedication to truth. For the first time since his arrest, he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten slightly. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. Frank clasped his shoulder. Son, some battles are worth fighting, no matter the odds. This is one of them. Sophia's fingers flew across her keyboard, racing against time. Her small apartment was dark except for the glow of her computer screen and a half-empty cup of cold coffee on her desk. She'd been writing for hours, carefully weaving together the witnesses' accounts with the fragments of unedited video she'd managed to obtain. The article title stared back at her. Honor Under Fire. The true story of the Tomb Guard incident. She read through it one final time, checking every fact, every quote. Mike and Pete's testimonies formed the backbone, their military credentials lending weight to their words. She'd included screenshots from the security footage showing the teens arriving with spray paint and alcohol, though the crucial moments of vandalism remained frustratingly out of reach. Sophia hit publish at 3 a.m., then shared the link across her social media networks. Within minutes, the first shares appeared. By dawn, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Did you see? She texted Elijah. It's going viral. The real story this time. Elijah sat at his kitchen table, reading the article on his mother's tablet. Loretta peered over his shoulder, her hand resting protectively on his back. Sergeant Ward's actions that night weren't those of aggression, but of sacred duty. He read aloud. Multiple witnesses confirmed the teens' deliberate provocation and vandalism of one of our nation's most hallowed monuments. The story spread like wildfire through veterans groups and military families. By mid-morning, Local news stations were picking it up. Comments sections filled with outrage. Not at Elijah, but at the privileged teens who desecrated the tomb. "Look at this," Loretta said, showing Elijah her phone. A Facebook group called Stand with Sergeant Ward had gained 10,000 members overnight. Videos surfaced of other incidents involving the three teens: school fights, vandalism, bullying, that had mysteriously disappeared from social media before. Frank called around noon. "Turn on the news, son." Channel 7. Elijah flipped on the TV. A reporter stood at Arlington's gates, where dozens of veterans in uniform had gathered. Many held signs, "Protect our monuments," and "Justice for SGT Ward." The camera panned across families of fallen soldiers joining the crowd, their gold star pins glinting in the sunlight. "The response has been overwhelming," the reporter said. Veterans organizations from across the country are demanding a full investigation into both the vandalism and the apparent cover-up that followed. More people arrived throughout the day. Military spouses brought food and water. Children of service members laid flowers. The peaceful crowd grew into hundreds, then thousands, maintaining respectful silence near the tomb while their signs spoke volumes. Sophia arrived at the vigil with her camera, documenting the surge of support. She interviewed Gold Star mothers who spoke of their children's sacrifices and the sacred nature of the ground. Combat veterans described what the tomb meant to them, their voices thick with emotion. "This is about more than one incident," a retired Marine colonel told her. "It's about privilege versus honor, about whether money can buy immunity from consequences." The teens' families tried to push back. Senator Hayes appeared on a friendly news show, calling the gathering politically motivated. But his practiced smile faltered when the host asked about his son's sealed records. By evening, news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting aerial views of the candlelit vigil. Someone had started a live stream, which Elijah watched from his living room couch, his mother's hand clasped tightly in his. The camera showed Frank leading a group of Vietnam veterans in a silent salute. Mike and Pete stood among them, faces stern with purpose. A young Gold Star widow spoke quietly about her husband, buried just yards from where the vandalism occurred. "Those boys spit on more than marble," she said. "They spit on every sacrifice made for this country. And someone finally had the courage to stop them." Elijah watched as more people joined the vigil. The crowd now stretched from the tomb to the cemetery gates, their candles creating a river of light in the gathering dusk. Many wore uniforms: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, standing shoulder to shoulder with civilians who understood the meaning of respect. Sophia's article had cracked the wall of silence. The truth was spreading, carried by thousands of voices that wouldn't be silenced by money or influence. For the first time since that night, Elijah felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of despair giving way to a fragile hope. "Look," Loretta whispered, pointing to the screen. The live stream showed a group of young soldiers in dress uniforms arriving straight from duty. They moved through the crowd to stand at attention, an impromptu honor guard for their suspended brother. Elijah touched the screen, his finger tracing the familiar paths he'd walked so many times, the sacred ground he'd sworn to protect. The crowd held their candles higher, light pushing back the darkness, truth challenging power. A notification popped up on his phone. Another message from Sophia. "This is just the beginning. The truth is getting harder for them to bury." He watched the vigil continue into the night, each candle a star of hope, each person a reminder that honor still meant something in this world. The fluorescent lights of the newspaper office buzzed overhead as Elijah made his way through the maze of empty desks. It was nearly 8 p.m., but Sophia's desk lamp still glowed in the corner. She sat hunched over her computer, her usual confident posture replaced by something more guarded. "Sophia?" Elijah called softly. She startled, then tried to hide it with a weak smile. "Hey, thanks for coming." Her voice was strained, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Papers were scattered across her desk. Printouts of emails, social media posts, and what looked like legal documents. "What's wrong?" Elijah asked, pulling up a chair. "The vigil was incredible. The story's getting out there." Sophia rubbed her temples. "That's just it. They're fighting back. Hard." She turned her monitor toward him. On the screen was a new video interview, one of the cemetery's night guards claiming he'd watched the whole incident. "Sergeant Ward was agitated that night," the guard said. "Those boys were just taking photos. He lost control." "That's a lie," Elijah said, his jaw tightening. "That guard wasn't even on duty that night. I remember the rotation." "I know." Sophia pulled up more windows. "They've got 3 more witnesses saying the same thing, all with perfect credentials, all telling the exact same story. And look at this." She opened her email, showing him dozens of messages from her editor. "They're calling my reporting biased, saying I manipulated quotes, coached witnesses." Elijah leaned forward to read. Each email was more demanding than the last, questioning Sophia's sources, her methods, her integrity. The latest one was marked Urgent Retraction Demand. "Senator Hayes's lawyers sent that an hour ago," Sophia said. "They're threatening to sue the paper. My editor's freaking out." "Can they do that? When we have proof?" "Money talks." Sophia's voice was bitter. "The security footage we needed? Suddenly corrupted. The maintenance logs showing the graffiti cleanup? Missing. And your reinstatement hearing?" She met his eyes. "It's been postponed indefinitely." Elijah's stomach dropped. "What?" "Some bureaucratic excuse about pending investigation materials. They're burying it in red tape." She ran a hand through her hair. "And it gets worse. Mike and Pete? Both got calls suggesting their VA benefits might need review. Frank's protest arrest from last month? Suddenly, they're pushing for maximum penalties." A wave of guilt washed over Elijah. "They're going after everyone who spoke up for me, including me." Sophia's voice wavered slightly. She pulled out her phone, showing him a series of texts from unknown numbers. Threats, explicit and detailed. "My apartment's been watched." "Someone followed me to work today." Elijah's hands clenched. "Have you called the police?" "They said there's not enough evidence to act on." She laughed hollowly. "Just like they said about the vandalism." A notification pinged on Elijah's phone. His mother had sent a photo, a plain white envelope that had been left on their doorstep. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "Drop it, or lose everything." "They sent one to my mom, too," he said quietly. Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "They think they can scare us into silence, like they've done before." She pulled up more files, other incidents involving the 3 teens, other victims who'd been pressured into dropping charges. This is their playbook. Intimidate, discredit, bury the truth under money and influence. Elijah stood and paced the empty office, feeling trapped. The lights of the city glowed through the windows, but they seemed cold now, distant. His phone buzzed again, more notifications about news articles questioning his story, his character, his fitness for duty. "The worst part," Sophia said, "it's working. People are starting to doubt. The vigil's momentum is fading. Social media's turning against us." She showed him the trending topics: conspiracy theories about political motives, accusations of race baiting, cruel memes mocking his service. "What about the unedited video?" Elijah asked. "The one showing everything?" "Dylan's father hired experts to testify it was doctored. They're claiming we fabricated evidence." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry, Elijah. I thought truth would be enough." Elijah nodded slowly, his throat tight. I should go. It's late. He needed to check on his mother, make sure she was safe. Thank you, Sophia, for everything you risked. We're not done, she insisted, but her voice lacked its usual fire. The drive home felt longer than usual. Elijah kept checking his mirrors, wondering if he was being followed too. The street was quiet when he pulled up to his house, but the silence felt threatening now rather than peaceful. Inside, his mother had left a light on. His dress uniform still hung perfectly pressed on the back of his bedroom chair, silver badge gleaming in the dim light. Elijah stood in the doorway, staring at it, at the crisp lines and polished buttons, at everything it represented. He reached out to touch the sleeve, remembering the weight of it, the pride he'd felt putting it on each day. Now he wondered if he'd ever wear it again, ever stand that sacred watch, ever feel that sense of purpose and honor. The uniform hung silent in the darkness, offering no answers. The numbers on Elijah's bedside clock blurred together as he tossed and turned. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those sneering faces, heard their laughter echoing through the sacred grounds. The weight of his suspended duty pressed down on his chest like a stone. At 4 a.m., he gave up trying to rest. The pre-dawn air was crisp as he dressed in jeans and a plain black sweater, civilian clothes that felt wrong on his skin after years of uniforms. His mother was still asleep as he slipped out the front door, her worry-lined face finally peaceful. The streets were empty as Elijah walked the familiar route to Arlington. His feet knew every crack in the sidewalk, every turn of the path. He'd made this journey countless times before, but never like this. Never as an outsider. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, iron bars stark against the lightening sky. Elijah stopped short of entering, his hands gripping the cold metal. From here, he could see the gentle slope leading up to the tomb. His heart ached at the sight of another guard performing the ritual he knew by heart. 21 steps. Turn. 21 steps back. The precise movements were ingrained in Elijah's muscles, in his very being. He watched the guard's measured pace, the rifle positioned exactly as regulations demanded. The morning light caught on polished brass and pristine wool. An older couple walked past him through the gates, the woman carrying flowers. They gave him a wide berth, eyes flickering with recognition before quickly looking away. Elijah's jaw clenched. Just days ago, visitors had watched him with respect, even awe. Now he was someone to fear, to avoid. The guard changed shifts as the sun crept higher. Elijah stayed rooted in place, unable to tear himself away. Each click of heels, each precise movement of the changing of the guard ceremony twisted something deeper in his chest. But beneath the pain, something else was crystallizing. A clarity he'd been missing. This was bigger than his career, bigger than his reputation. The unknown soldier represented every service member who'd given everything for their country. That sacred trust had been violated not just by 3 spoiled teens, but by a system that protected wealth and privilege over honor and truth. "Thought I might find you here," a gruff voice said behind him. Elijah turned to see Frank Delaney, looking worn but determined in his old Vietnam veteran's jacket. The older man's eyes were sharp as they studied Elijah's face. "Couldn't sleep," Elijah admitted. "None of us could." Frank moved to stand beside him at the gate. "Been making calls all night, calling in favors from people who still remember what honor means." They watched in silence as the morning guard continued the eternal vigil. Each step was a reminder of what had been taken from Elijah, but also of what he was fighting to protect. "You know what gets me?" Frank said finally. "Those boys didn't just disrespect you, or the tomb. They disrespected every man and woman who ever put on a uniform. Every family who ever got that folded flag. And their folks think money can make that right. Elijah nodded, his throat tight. They don't understand what this place means. No, they don't. Frank's voice hardened. But they're about to learn. The older man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. His weathered hands pressed it firmly into Elijah's palm. It's the full video, uncut, Frank said quietly. Security camera footage from that night. Shows everything. The beer cans, the spray paint, the slurs. Everything they tried to bury. Elijah stared at the tiny device. How did you... Let's just say I still know some people who believe in doing what's right, even when it costs them. Frank's eyes never left the tomb. Time to end this. The weight of the USB drive in Elijah's hand felt like both a burden and a weapon. He closed his fingers around it, feeling the sharp edges press into his skin. Above them, the guard continued his eternal march, oblivious to the small act of defiance taking place at the gates. They'll try to stop us, Elijah said. They've already threatened everyone who's tried to help. Let them try. Frank's voice carried the steel of a man who'd faced worse odds. Some things are worth fighting for. Some truths need to be told, no matter the cost. The sun had fully risen now, painting the marble of the tomb in soft golden light. Elijah watched as another visitor placed a small American flag at its base. Even now, even with all the controversy, people still came to pay their respects, still remembered what this place stood for. He straightened his shoulders, feeling a familiar resolve settle over him. The USB drive in his hand might be small, but its contents could shatter the wall of lies they'd built. The truth was, finally, within reach. Sophia's cramped office buzzed with tension as she connected the USB drive to her computer. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, evidence of another sleepless night. Elijah leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped tightly, as the video player opened. "Are you ready?" Sophia asked, her finger hovering over the play button. Elijah nodded. "Show me everything." The footage was crystal clear, captured by Arlington's security cameras. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. Three figures stumbled into view, their expensive clothes and casual swagger unmistakable. Carter Hayes took a long drink from his beer can before tossing it onto the sacred ground. "Look at the robot!" Dylan Brooks's voice rang out clearly. "Think he's real, or just a statue?" Sophia's jaw clenched as she watched. The uncut footage showed everything the boys' edited version had hidden. Mason Clark produced the spray paint from his jacket, the metallic rattle picked up by the camera's microphone. "This part," Elijah said quietly, pointing to the screen. "This is when I first heard them coming." They watched as the teens escalated their taunts, their voices growing louder. Beer cans clattered across the pavement. The camera caught every moment of their deliberate disrespect. "Got the robot mad yet?" Carter jeered on screen. "Maybe he needs some color on his precious tomb." The spray paint hissed as it marked the white marble. Sophia glanced at Elijah, seeing the pain in his eyes as he relived the moment. On screen, his uniformed figure finally broke formation, stepping forward with military precision. "You will cease this desecration immediately," Screen Elijah commanded. "Oh, it talks!" Mason laughed. "What's wrong, robot? Don't like our redecorating?" The racial slur that followed made Sophia flinch. The camera caught it clearly, along with the ugly sneer on Mason's face as he spat on the tomb's surface. Only then did Elijah move, pushing Mason back with controlled force. Nothing like the violent assault their edited clip had portrayed. "Pause it," Elijah said hoarsely. Sophia stopped the playback, giving him a moment to collect himself. "This changes everything," she said, already pulling up her draft article. "The timestamp proves it wasn't edited or doctored. The audio is pristine. Their whole narrative falls apart. Elijah stared at the frozen image. Will people believe it? After everything their families have done to control the story? They'll have to. Sophia's fingers flew across her keyboard. The evidence is undeniable. And I've been building a larger story around this. Their family's history of covering up scandals, buying influence, silencing critics. She turned her screen to show him the article taking shape. The headline read, "Sacred Trust Betrayed. The Truth Behind the Tomb Guard Controversy." "I want to add your voice to this," Sophia said. "A personal statement about what that night meant to you, what the tomb represents. People need to understand what was really violated here." Elijah was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Their families will come after you harder than ever." "Let them try." Sophia's dark eyes flashed with determination. "I became a journalist to expose exactly this kind of corruption. The public deserves to know the truth." They spent the next hours crafting the story. Sophia wove together the security footage, witness statements from Frank and other veterans, and documentation of the family's previous cover-ups. Elijah's statement came straight from his heart, describing the sacred duty of guarding the unknown soldier, and the pain of watching that sacrifice mocked. "Every step we take at the tomb is measured," he wrote. 21 steps, representing the 21-gun salute. Each movement honors those who gave everything for their country. When I saw them desecrating that symbol, I didn't see their wealth or status. I saw an insult to every fallen soldier, every grieving family, every American who understands what true sacrifice means. The office grew darker as evening fell. Sophia's editor had already cleared space on the front page of their digital platform. The story was set to go live at dawn, prime time for maximum impact. "Once this publishes, there's no going back," Sophia warned, her finger hovering over the schedule button. "They'll throw everything they have at discrediting us." Elijah stood straight, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. "The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs to be told." Sophia nodded and pressed the button. The article was locked in, set to explode across the internet in just a few hours. She saved multiple backups of the footage and article, storing them in secure locations. "Now we wait," she said, checking the time. 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours until the truth they'd fought so hard to expose would finally see light. Elijah looked out her office window at the darkened city. Somewhere out there, 3 privileged boys and their powerful families had no idea what was coming. For the first time since that night at the tomb, he felt the weight on his shoulders beginning to lift. The sun crept over Washington, D.C.'s horizon as Sophia's article went live. Within minutes, notifications began flooding her phone. She sat in her office, having never left, watching the view counter explode. "It's happening," she told Elijah, who had dozed off in a chair. He blinked awake, immediately alert. The uncut security footage played on every major network. Anchors spoke in grave tones about the shocking revelation and deliberate manipulation of the original narrative. Social media erupted with fury as people shared the video, their comments a tidal wave of outrage. Tomb Guard justice started trending. Then, Arlington disgrace. Within an hour, both were in the top spots nationwide. Elijah's phone rang. It was Frank. "Turn on CNN," the old veteran said gruffly. They switched on Sophia's office TV. A panel of veterans was discussing the footage, their faces tight with controlled anger. A retired general spoke directly to the camera. "What we witnessed in this video isn't just vandalism. It's an attack on everything Arlington represents." Outside the cemetery gates, crowds began gathering spontaneously. People brought flags and flowers, forming an impromptu vigil that grew by the minute. Military families stood shoulder to shoulder with civilians. Some wept openly, watching the footage on their phones. "Look at this," Sophia said, showing Elijah her laptop. Veterans organizations across the country were releasing statements demanding immediate action. The American Legion called it a disgrace that demands the strongest possible response. The VFW announced plans for nationwide demonstrations. The story spread like wildfire. International news picked it up. Comments poured in from around the world, many from allied nations' military personnel expressing solidarity with Elijah. At 9 a.m., the Senate Ethics Committee announced an emergency session. Senator Hayes, Carter's father, was notably absent. Reports surfaced that he wasn't answering calls from party leadership. "They're running scared," Frank said when he arrived at Sophia's office, bringing fresh coffee and donuts. "Their usual playbook won't work this time. Can't edit away the truth when everyone's seen it." Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from a contact inside the Justice Department. She read it and looked up, eyes wide. "They're filing charges, federal charges, since it's a national monument, and hate crime enhancements because of the racial slur." The crowds outside Arlington had swelled to thousands. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of the gathering. People held signs reading, "Honor cannot be bought," and "Justice for the unknown soldier." At 10:30 a.m., police cruisers pulled up to the Hayes Mansion in Georgetown. Reporters were already there, cameras rolling as officers approached the door. Through the windows, they could see frantic movement inside. Similar scenes played out at the Brooks and Clark residences. Dylan's mother, the powerful lobbyist, tried blocking the officer's path. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded, her voice shrill on camera. "I'll have your badges." The officers were unmoved. They had their orders, backed by federal warrants. Mason Clark came out fighting, trying to run. Two officers tackled him on his manicured lawn. His father stood in the doorway, for once speechless, as his son was handcuffed. Carter Hayes went quietly, his usual swagger gone. His face was ashen as officers led him to the cruiser. Neighbors filmed on their phones as the boy who thought himself untouchable was placed in the back seat. Dylan Brooks tried claiming the video was fake, that he had proof. The officers ignored his protests. His phone was already being seized as evidence. In Sophia's office, they watched it all unfold on live TV. Frank nodded grimly with each arrest. "Justice comes for everyone eventually," he said. "Even the ones who think they're above it." Elijah remained quiet, his expression unreadable as he watched the boys being taken away. These were the same young men who had mocked him, who had tried to destroy his career and honor. Now they looked small, scared, stripped of their protective bubble of privilege. "Your mother's calling," Sophia said softly, pointing to his buzzing phone. He answered. Loretta was crying, but they were tears of joy. "Baby, you did it," she said. "You stood your ground, and the truth won out." The boys' parents stood helplessly in their doorways, watching their children being driven away. All their money, all their connections, all their power had finally met something it couldn't buy or manipulate. Undeniable truth. The crowd outside Arlington had begun singing, "God Bless America." The sound carried across the cemetery grounds, past the rows of white headstones, all the way to the tomb where another guard stood watch, executing those same 21 steps that had been Elijah's sacred duty. Sophia was already receiving calls from major publishers interested in turning the story into a book. But for now, she simply sat with Elijah and Frank, watching justice unfold in real time across their screens. The three spoiled boys who had thought themselves invincible were about to learn a harsh lesson about accountability. Their parents' influence couldn't shield them anymore. The truth had finally caught up with them, captured in high definition and shared with the world. The Pentagon's corridors felt different today. Elijah walked between two military police escorts, but this time they weren't there to restrain him. Their presence was ceremonial, respectful. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as they approached a heavy wooden door marked Joint Chiefs Conference Room B. Inside, the room hummed with quiet tension. Around a massive oval table sat generals with rows of ribbons on their chests, stern-faced lawmakers, and at the head, the Secretary of Defense himself. Their expressions were unreadable as Elijah stood at attention. "Sergeant Ward," the secretary said, "please be seated." Elijah took the single chair positioned at the table's foot. The weight of all those stars and medals focused on him was almost physical. A projector hummed to life, displaying the uncut footage on the wall. "We've reviewed the complete evidence," a three-star general stated, his voice gravelly, "including security camera footage from multiple angles, eyewitness statements, and the social media records of the accused." Another general, this one with silver hair and battle scars, leaned forward. The manipulation of the original narrative was extensive, deliberate. "We owe you an apology, Sergeant." Elijah kept his posture straight, his voice steady. "Sir, I only did my duty." "Your duty," the Secretary of Defense echoed, "and more. You showed remarkable restraint in the face of provocation that would have tested any soldier's discipline." A folder was passed down the table. Each official signed it without hesitation. When it reached Elijah, he saw the formal reinstatement orders, topped with the Department of Defense seal. "Effective immediately," the Secretary continued, "your suspension is lifted. You'll return to your post with full honors and back pay." But they weren't finished. A congressman cleared his throat, sliding another document forward. "The investigation has expanded beyond the initial incident. The families involved—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Their attempts to cover this up led us to discover other improprieties. Serious improprieties," added a stern-faced woman Elijah recognized as the Director of Military Intelligence. "Senator Hayes's private communications reveal a pattern of corruption involving defense contracts. Mrs. Brooks's lobbying firm appears to have been laundering bribes through offshore accounts. And Mr. Clark," the congressman continued, "has been using classified information to manipulate government bids. The FBI is involved now." Elijah absorbed this silently. The mighty families that had tried to crush him were facing their own reckonings. Their power, built on corruption, was crumbling. "There's more," the secretary said. He nodded to an aide who opened the conference room door. Frank Delaney entered, wearing his old service medals. Behind him came Sophia Morales, press credentials hanging around her neck. They took seats along the wall, Frank giving Elijah a subtle nod. "Your allies took considerable personal risk," the secretary acknowledged. "Their roles in exposing the truth won't be forgotten." A general pushed a velvet box across the table. Inside was a meritorious service medal. "For upholding the highest standards of duty under extreme duress," he explained. "Sir," Elijah said, "I don't need—" "It's not about need, Sergeant," the general interrupted. "It's about recognition, about showing every soldier that honor still matters." The Secretary of Defense stood, and everyone followed suit. "Tomorrow at Oro 900, there will be a public ceremony at Arlington. You'll be formally reinstated at the tomb, in front of the media and a national audience." Elijah's throat tightened. "Sir, the tomb guard serves in silence. We don't seek attention." "Sometimes," the silver-haired general said softly, "the best way to honor silence is to let the truth ring out. Those boys didn't just attack you, Sergeant. They attacked everything that post represents. The nation needs to see it restored." The secretary extended his hand. "You've done the unknown soldier proud, Sergeant Ward. Now let's show America what real honor looks like." Elijah shook hands down the line. Generals, lawmakers, intelligence directors. Each grip was firm, each nod respectful. These were no longer people judging him, but equals acknowledging his integrity. Frank caught up with him in the corridor afterward. "Told you the truth would surface," he said gruffly, emotion making his voice rough. Sophia was scribbling in her notepad. "They're letting me break the story about the corruption investigation," she said. "It's going to be bigger than we thought." Elijah looked down at his reinstatement papers, the official seals gleaming. Tomorrow he would wear his uniform again. Tomorrow he would return to those sacred 21 steps. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Baby, turn on the news." They found a television in the Pentagon lobby. Every channel was running the same breaking news banner. "Tomb Guard vindicated. Corruption, scandal rocks Washington elite. The mighty had fallen. The truth had prevailed. And tomorrow, Elijah would return to his post. His honor not just restored, but strengthened by the fire he'd walked through." Frank squeezed his shoulder. "Get some rest, son. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." The autumn air carried a crisp bite as dawn broke over Arlington National Cemetery. Dew sparkled on perfectly trimmed grass, and a light mist clung to the marble monuments. Thousands gathered in hushed reverence around the tomb of the unknown soldier, their breath visible in the morning chill. Loretta Ward stood in the front row, her Sunday best adorned with a gold star pin. Her eyes glistened with pride as she watched the path where her son would soon appear. Next to her, Frank Delaney stood ramrod straight in his Vietnam service uniform, medals catching the early light. Sophia Morales held her press badge, but hadn't touched her notebook. This moment wasn't for reporting, but for witnessing. At precisely 0900, a bugle called across the grounds. The crowd parted as Sergeant Elijah Ward approached in his perfectly pressed uniform, every crease exact, every button gleaming. His face was composed, showing none of the emotion that must have churned beneath the surface. Each step was measured, precise, the walk of a man who knew his worth. The Secretary of Defense stood at attention near the tomb, flanked by generals and officials, but they weren't the focus. All eyes followed Elijah as he took his position. His shoes, polished to mirror shine, clicked sharply on the marble. "Present arms!" The command rang out. Elijah snapped to attention, his M14 rifle held exactly perpendicular to his body. The morning sun caught the weapon's polished wood and steel. The rifle felt right in his hands, like coming home. In the third row, a news camera caught the fallen faces of Carter Hayes, Dylan Brooks, and Mason Clark, the three boys who had tried to destroy him. They stood in suits now, under court order to witness this ceremony as part of their sentencing. Their once proud families huddled in the back, shadows of their former selves. Senator Hayes had resigned in disgrace. Mrs. Brooks's firm was being dismantled by federal investigators. Mr. Clark faced years in prison, but Elijah didn't spare them a glance. His focus remained where it belonged, on the tomb, on his sacred duty, on the honor he had fought to protect. The secretary stepped forward to speak. "Today, we right a wrong." His voice carried across the silent crowd. "We restore to his post a soldier who exemplified the highest virtues of his charge, even when faced with despicable provocations." Loretta dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Frank stood straighter, if that was possible, his weathered face set with satisfaction. Sergeant Ward's unwavering dedication to his duty, his restraint in the face of hatred, and his persistence in seeking truth embody the very principles this memorial represents. The secretary's words echoed off the marble columns. The desecration of this sacred space was not just an attack on one soldier, but an assault on everything we hold dear. Today, we show that honor prevails, that truth cannot be buried, that justice, though sometimes slow, arrives with certainty. Sophia noticed how the disgraced families flinched at these words. Their names had become cautionary tales, their influence evaporated, their reputations destroyed by their own corruption and their son's cruelty. "Sergeant Ward," the secretary concluded, "resume your post." Elijah executed a perfect about-face. 21 steps. Turn. 21 steps. Each movement was flawless, a testament to countless hours of training and dedication. The click of his heels marked time like a metronome of dignity restored. Veterans in the crowd stood at attention, offering silent salutes. Gold Star families bowed their heads in respect. Even journalists kept their cameras lowered, honoring the solemnity of the moment. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of mist. Elijah continued his vigil, each turn and step exact, his bearing impeccable. This was more than a ceremony now. It was a demonstration of unbreakable spirit, of honor that couldn't be tarnished by lies or corruption. Loretta watched her son with quiet joy, remembering the boy who had dreamed of serving, who had never let injustice break his spirit. Frank nodded in satisfaction, seeing in Elijah the best of what military service could produce. Sophia observed it all, knowing this story would be told for years, not just of scandal exposed, but of dignity upheld. The three boys who had tried to mock this ceremony now couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Their attempt to treat this sacred duty as a joke had revealed their own hollow cores. Their names would be forgotten, while Elijah's would be remembered with respect. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Elijah maintained his steady pace. 21 steps. Turn. 21 steps. His shadow moved with the sun across the marble, a living reminder that some things remain unshakable. Honor. Duty. Truth. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood as it always had, its white marble now free of the vandals' marks. And before it, Elijah Ward kept his eternal watch, silent and unbroken, a guardian whose dedication had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. The old saying echoed in many minds that morning. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Today, they had seen that arc complete its course. Honor had prevailed over corruption, truth over lies, dignity over disgrace. The changing of the guard would come later, but for now, Sergeant Elijah Ward held his post, his vindication complete, his duty unending. In his silence was a power that no amount of wealth or influence could overcome. The power of one person standing firm for what was right. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.